In this unit, we're going to look at how you can go about implementing cause and effect in the classroom. There are 4 areas that we're going to briefly look at. Firstly, we're going to look at planning. Every teacher needs to plan to include cause and effect in their teaching. Although there are many examples every day to draw on, when it comes to the different subjects, you need to identify and select where you can focus on a cause and effect. Secondly, we're going to look at your teaching. Here we're going to look at the different vocabulary and STEM questions that you can use to reinforce the cause and effect relationship. Thirdly, we're going to look at note-taking, often overlooked by teachers, but very important and a learning process for kids in your classroom when they're taking notes. And lastly, we're going to look at assessment. We're going to look at how you can include cause and effect in your assessments to challenge and extend learners. It is important to remember that cause and effect is a way of thinking. It is not content or facts that the learner must remember, but rather a skill of thinking critically. Let's begin with planning. All teachers should plan for their lessons in advance. And a generic lesson plan should include a detailed description of the topic or activities that you wish to cover in your lesson. You should include how you plan to differentiate for learners who struggle and are working on different cognitive levels, an extension for learners who have acquired the skill and need to be extended and pushed. Next is assessment. Whether it's informal or formal, you need to plan for this. And most importantly, skills. Content changes from grade to grade, but the skills that learners need to develop and harness are needed throughout school. Skills such as identifying cause and effect, comparing, analyzing, giving opinions, justifying opinions. These are some of the many skills that we need our learners to be developing. Now, there are 3 stages to teaching a skill. Firstly, the learning of the skill. And this is where you as a teacher explicitly teach the skill, and your activities are perhaps done as a whole class with lots of support by you from the teacher. The next level up is understanding the skill. And as a teacher, you want to start withdrawing your support and assess how many of your learners are beginning to grasp or acquire the skill. And these activities can be done in small groups or pairs where there is still some support from the teacher, but you are beginning to pull back. And lastly is the application of the skill. Can the learner work independently and apply the skill correctly? As the teacher, you need to determine at what level your learners are at and what activities will support and promote the learners to develop an understanding of cause and effect. Now, cause and effect has many textual clues or signal words that signal to the learner that there is a cause and effect relationship, such as, my tea was too hot when I took a sip, therefore I burnt my tongue. Therefore is the textual clue. It lets us know that an effect is about to follow. So, my tea was too hot is the cause, and I burnt my tongue is the effect. And the word therefore connects the cause and effect together. My tea was too hot when I took a sip, therefore I burnt my tongue. Let's look at a few more examples. If I finish my homework, then my mum lets me watch TV. The signal words are if and then, and that lets the learner know that there's a cause and effect relationship. Let's look at another one. Because I went to bed late last night, I was grumpy at school the next day. Because is the signal word, and again should trigger to learners that there's a cause and effect relationship. Let's do one more. It was a very hot day, so sport after school was cancelled. The signal word there is so, and it indicates a cause and effect relationship. And it is very important to help learners identify these signal words and to expose learners to them when you are teaching. The teaching process is there to help learners learn to think in different ways, to make connections, to come up with ideas and solutions. If we want our learners to think on this level, we need to teach them how to do it. We need to guide and push learners to think. We need to give cause and effect examples and expose learners to different ways cause and effect can look. Not each question that is about cause and effect necessarily has the words cause and effect in the question themselves. Let's look at a few examples. We could say, explain the impact of no sunlight on the photosynthesis process. This is getting learners to think about cause and effect. Another example is to describe the influence of Mandela on the people of South Africa. Again, learners need to look at the cause and effect and understand the cause and effect relationship. Determine the effect of plastic usage on the environment. What might happen if Cape Town ran out of water? And lastly, why did NASA decide to remove Pluto as one of the 9 planets? So these are all different ways of getting learners to think about the cause and effect relationship without explicitly putting the words cause and effect in the questions. And learners need to be guided and taught and shown how to work through these questions and how to answer them correctly. The third way to implement cause and effect in the classroom is through note-taking. How learners take notes will impact how they make sense and understand what they've learned, and how they will later remember and recall this information. Our minds do not work in a linear manner with lists and bullet points. We are constantly adjusting and adding new information and including it to amend the information through our experiences and new facts learned. And learners should be guided to make effective notes that mimic their thinking pattern. And this is most effectively done through mind maps. Learners need to be able to use color, arrows, timelines, and flowcharts that guide them to think and not just to remember facts. And as mentioned previously, the CRAB mind map is an excellent tool to help support and guide learners to think through the cause and effect relationship. Lastly, we're going to look at assessment. There are 2 common mistakes that teachers make in assessment. Firstly, we tend to leave the difficult questions for the assessment. On your screen now, you'll see an example of Bloom's taxonomy. The bottom layer is called knowledge, and this is purely just remembering facts. Next is comprehension, where learners provide an understanding of the facts that they have learned. And thirdly is application, and this is where we look at whether the learner can apply the skills that they have learned. Now, teachers usually spend the bulk of their teaching time on these 3 layers. But when it comes to assessment, we ask learners higher order questions from the top 3 layers and expect them to answer without having guided them on how to answer these questions. Depending on the question, cause and effect falls into the top 3 tiers. Teachers need to help learners to develop these skills to identify and analyze the cause and effect relationship. It would be the same as waking up tomorrow morning and you were told to run a marathon that you have not trained for. It's rather daunting. The second common mistake is providing learners with the answers. So going through higher order questions that are explored and analyzed in class. Learners have made notes about them, and then when it comes time for the assessment, we ask them the exact same question in the assessment, thinking that it is a higher order cognitive question. However, because the learners have seen the exact question before, it now becomes a lower level thinking question, because all you're asking the learners to do is to remember or recall facts that you have previously discussed. This is not to say that you cannot use any question that you have previously looked at in class in your assessment, but it's to remind you to really think at what level that question is at. Is it really a higher order question like you thought? So now to end off, I want you to always keep in mind that when you're implementing cause and effect, that you are helping to train the learners to think at a higher cognitive level. And just as you would train for a marathon, so you need to plan a training program to help guide your learners to acquire the skill of understanding cause and effect.